Hi and welcome to the channel. So in today's video I'm going to be working on the Mercedes. So in a previous short that I uploaded, you would have seen the amount of rust that the garage had seen, and they basically said that it would need a whole new subframe axle and the rest of it. On further inspection, I've seen that it's actually just surface corrosion, and it's just the coil spring and the shock absorber and the control arm that needs replacing. So in today's video I'm going to crack on with that. So I'm going to get to it now and show you how it's done. So guys, what I've done is I've taken the wheel off, and I'm just going to be showing you what I'm going to be replacing. So this here is the main control arm that links from the subframe to the hub here, and then here this is the shock absorber and this is the coil spring. So I'll be replacing these three components in today's video. So I'm going to start by removing, there's a nut there, just where my finger is. Then there's one here for the shock absorber, and then there's one up here, back here, which is a big bolt that has to come off. So I've found the best way to do this is to remove this arm here and then undo this, and then this arm will lower down, and then I can take the spring out, and the shock absorber is mounted up there. So to access that, I'll have to do that from the boot, and I'll show you that step once I've done the other steps. So first I am going to loosen this nut off, and then I'm going to loosen the shock absorber bolt, and then I'm going to take the rear bolt off. Okay, so the bolt that goes through here, which is, you can't see it because obviously this is in the way, but it's behind here. I found what the best way to remove it is with a 22mm socket on this side, and on the other side behind here. So it's hard to see because all these control arms in the way, but just behind here, it's hard to show you on camera. Just there, here, like there, is a 21mm spanner, and then the bolt. So the issue you're going to face with this is you're going to need a trolley jack. So I've used an axle stand to support the car, because you're going to need the trolley jack. You're going to need the trolley jack to push pressure under the control arm, so that it allows these bolts to slide out, because at the moment you've got the pressure of the spring and the shock absorber that's pushing down. So you get your trolley jack, and you want to raise it up like that slightly. So if you're still struggling to get it out, what I like to use is like an extension bar on the other side. To then hammer the bolt through. So then the bolt will come out like that, and then make sure you put the nut to it together so that then you won't lose it when you put it aside. It's nice to keep them together. So then I found with the shock absorber one, it's an E16, which I think is like an inverted Torx on this end like that. And then on the other side, it's a 16mm spanner. And then I want to impact this out. And then you just saw it pop out. Same with this one, put the nut to the bolt together so that they stay together. And also make sure that that is not too rounded off. I want to be cleaning these when I put them back on anyway, because if they're threaded, you're going to struggle to get a torque socket on there to get it back on again. So now we've got that out of the way, you can put a little pressure on there. And then the spring would come out, but I'm going to take these bolts out on that side as well. So I think they're the same size. Oh no, they're a lot smaller. So let's have a look. Is it a 20? Okay, so it's an 18 on that side, and I'm going to try 19 on that side. I'm going to use a socket on the other side. Okay, so it's actually 18 on both ends. Once I've loosened it a bit, I'm going to come in with the impact and gently whip it out. So that's that one out, and again put the knot on the other side to keep them together. So another thing I like to do is I like to put them in the order that they came out. So this one is the first one that was nearest to me, then that one is for the shock absorber, and then that one is for the back end of the control arm. So front control arm, shock absorber, and then rear control arm. So now, as you can see, the control arm is out, and it's getting replaced because it's an utter state. And then the coil spring will just gently come out like that as well. So the big issue with these Mercedes is because one end of the spring is hidden by the control arm, you can't see it. So that's why you couldn't see this bit, and that's where the actual spring had snapped off. So that's why this coil spring's getting replaced as well. So now I need to loosen up the top mount for the shock absorber by going in the boot. So I'll come back and show you that stage. So I'm in the boot now. So in order to access the shock absorber top mount, we need to pull away at this boot lining here. So there's some in this corner here. Put the light on. In the corner here, there's like a little plug. And you need to, I'm going to get a little flat-edged screwdriver to remove this here so that this will all come down. So I've got one of these little plastic pry bar tool things. I'm going to use that to remove it. And then you can pull this out. So this is the top mount strut here. I'm just going to zoom you in a bit. So what you need is a pair of vice grips so you can grip the top of it there, and a swan neck spanner to undo it there. So I'm just going to grab those tools. Okay, so grab myself a swan neck spanner kit. I'm just going to find out what size nut it is. not 16, so it's a 17. So get this one expand on like that, and then do this. So you've got grip on it there, so as you free this off, so the vice grips, because what happens is, because the shock absorber, the top half of it, it will just keep spinning round and round freely unless you've got hold of it with the vice grips, and then it allows you to free off the nut. So unfortunately with this process you can't rush it, so you can't just, you could probably get away with using an impact on here with a deep socket, but it's likely still gonna just keep spinning and spinning. So the best method for doing this is patience. Actually, there's a quicker way of doing this. So I'm going to undo the vice grip, and what I want to do is I'm going to get myself a 17 ratcheting spanner. So I'm going to get that now. Okay, so I've got myself a ratcheting spanner. So you always make sure, obviously, that's lefty loosey, and then put that on there. So I don't know if you can see, but that is just spinning round with that. That's why you need the vice grips on the top, like that. So now I've got the ratcheting spanner, it makes it a lot quicker. If you've got someone to help you with this job, it makes it a lot easier because they can actually hold the bottom of the shock absorber so it stabilizes it a bit. So now that nut is getting really loose now, that to the point where I can now take this off, and it should undo by hand. Oh no, it's still spinning round. Right, now it's free. So you take all this off. Because you get all that new stuff with the new shock absorber. So as you can see, the shock absorber's just dropped out now and it's resting on the floor. So I'm going to grab it out. So the reason this needed replacing is because it's just, if I push down on it, it's just, it's actually seized. It's seized, so it's just stuck in the open position. It should go in and out smoothly. So I'm going to come back with the new components, and then in reverse order put everything back on. Okay, so when you get your new shock absorber, it comes with these bits, installation kit. So first we need to get this strap off. So push down from the top. Easier said than done. Take that strap off and you can see it's expanding out straight away. So in the kit, we need to put this rubber piece so that's like the dust cover. So I'll just show you what a good shock absorber should be like. When you push it down like this, it should be really hard to squeeze it down like this, and then it should slowly come back out like that. So that's a good shock absorber. A bad one would be very easy to compress all the way in, and then it wouldn't come back out at all. It would just it would go in and it would just stay there, because over time if you could see inside here, there's like a plunger, and the plunger, this is all filled with oil, and the plunger compresses the oil, and then it compresses the oil, and then the oil and the air gap pushes it back out again. So put the dust cover on. Then this goes on like that. Make sure it goes on this way, and then that cap goes on like that. Then this bit and this bit go inside the car like that, and then you get a new nut that secures it to the top. So I'm going to get my assistant to hold the shock absorber, because it needs to go into there, and I need my assistant to hold it while I do it up at the top. So I'm going to do that now. Okay, so I've got my assistant holding it through there. So then the rubber piece goes on top like that, then the metal piece goes on top of that, and then you get the nut. Let's start it off, and then it's the same as before. Get the 17mm ratcheting spanner on there and make sure it's in the righty-tighty position. I'm going to tighten it by hand. I think that's the wrong nut. Yeah, so I'm actually putting the wrong nut on. It needs to be the thicker one. So I'm just going to undo that. If you let go of it, positive pressure up for me, please. That's it, that's better. So now the right nut is on there. I can tighten it now. So when it gets to that stage where it starts spinning around, you need to just put the vice grips back on and tighten the rest of it up. So now I no longer need my assistant. So get the 17 on it again. And then the vice grips. So this time, because we're tightening it, you need to get the vice grips resting against that side. So this doesn't have to be too tight. Just until it stops turning there. So that's it. That's it done up back at the top. It's nice and tight. So next step. So you've got the lovely new shock absorber in here, and then you want to make sure that the eyes are rotated towards you like that. So then you get the new control arm, and it's just a reverse of before. So that end goes in like that. It's going to rest down there on the exhaust. And then we get the bolt that was furthest away. Actually, I'm just going to clean these bolts up off camera, and I'll come back and I'm going to put the spring in, put this all back, tighten everything up, and then the job will be done. Okay guys, so I've cleaned up the bolts using the bench grinder wire wheel. So that one's come out quite nice, and then that one's for the front. That one I couldn't get as clean, but and this one's for the shock absorber, which is a lot nicer than it was. So start with the rear control arm. So slide it till the holes align. Gently tap it with a hammer. So it goes through to the other side, and then start the nut on this side. Now then, at the moment, I just want that loosish. I don't want to tighten anything up until I've got the spring on and the shock. And then when everything's on, I tighten them down completely. So now, you're going to need the trolley jack. Well, actually, I'm going to put the new spring in first. So this is the brand new coil spring. So these marks are for Mercedes springs, and I think so. If your Mercedes has 3 blue stripes like this, you need to replace it with that one, because I think some suspension coil springs are designed for sports suspension and some are designed for normal Mercedes. So just make sure that when you order the replacement one, that it has the correct amount of colour dots and also the correct colours. I think some are yellow, white and red as well. So it's going to be hard to show you on camera, but if you look up there, that's where the spring sits, and you have to align it so that the end of it, this end here, goes into where it aligns at the top of the cup. Okay, so that's seated perfectly. And then it has to go in the correct way inside the control arm as well. So that sits like that. So I'm going to do that and then come back to you when I've done that. Okay, so using the trolley jack here, I've risen this end up while holding the spring in, and then I've managed to align the hole and put that bolt through. So then it's just a case of getting this front bolt in here. I'm going to try my best to show you on camera. So the next job is to align this part with this bit, and that's where this big bolt gets through. Now this is the bit I always struggle with. I'm going to try and pump the trolley jack up underneath it again while putting pressure. So if you're struggling with this bit, as I am, because the problem is trying to align that and getting that to pop in. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to keep whacking it with the as you can see here, this needs to slide up across this bit. So what I'm going to try is I'm going to try using a sledgehammer or a lump hammer to get that to slide in by hitting this bit here, and then that will eventually you'll be able to pop that in, and then you just put the bolt through, and then it's just a case of tightening this bolt up, and then that one over there, and make sure that you get them very, very tight, because you don't want any of these components to be loose, as they're your suspension components. So as you can see, I've already done the other side previously. So that's how you replace the shock absorber, coil spring and main controller on a Mercedes. It's quite a difficult job. I'm not going to lie and say that was easy, but it's definitely not easy by any means. The easiest bit is obviously doing up the nuts inside the boot. That's the easy bit. So make sure that when you tighten it back up at the top, you get someone just to hold this bit while you're doing it up at the top, because you're not going to be able to reach round, and reach it round with two arms, and unless you've got some kind of superhuman long arms, you're not going to be able to reach. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed the video. As always, AB Auto out.